Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Pixel by NETSTAIRS, our weekly, everyday meetings that we set up, and we obviously have the pleasure of having different guests talking about various topics that it impacts the industry and the market. And today we have the pleasure of having Mr. Paul H. Josie and Mr. Jose Caron. Paul, giving you a background, we will have two formats today. The first session is going to be by Mr. Josie talking about raising capital through the Jobs Act of 2012. Just giving you some background about Mr. Josie. He's a principal attorney at Josie PLLC in Washington, D.C. Before starting his own firm, Paul worked at law firms in Atlanta, Alexandria, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. And in the past 2 years, Paul's practice really became primarily focused on business of capitalization, which we love to work with him and value him because we work with a lot of startup companies and projects ourselves. His expertise comes from educating the consumers and the investors and entrepreneurs in various regulations such as CF, A+, Reg V, 506Cs, and so forth that some of you may not have heard of these terminologies. Paul has worked with clients throughout the country. In addition to helping clients navigate crowdfunding, SEC compliance, Paul runs the blog, the crowdfundinglawyers.com, which serves as an information clearinghouse for legal and the industry information about equity crowdfunding. This site receives thousands of unique visitors each month, and we hope you take the time, visit that, and at the same time, we'd like to introduce you to Paul. Without further ado, Paul, the podium is yours. Please.
Thank you, Ahmad. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you to the audience for having me today. It's very exciting for me to get to talk about the Jobs Act and all of the new ways that this can help businesses capitalize throughout the country. These things are really brand new, and so I'm a lawyer, but most of the time I feel more like I'm a salesman, because most people do not know about the Jobs Act. They don't know about the different ways that are available to companies to capitalize now that just were not available as little as 2 or 3 years ago. So a lot of what I do is I talk to companies and clients throughout the country, explain to them the new and exciting ways that the Jobs Act can help them raise capital, and that's what I'd like to do here today. And also talk a little bit about ICOs and the new economy that's emerging with digital tokens and that sort of thing. So with that, we'll get to my presentation. You see the first little picture there is supposed to be people waving wads of cash. So those aren't hourglasses or anything. If anybody was confused. So let's go to the next slide. The first thing that I'd like to talk about with equity crowdfunding is what it's not. Equity crowdfunding is not Kickstarter, it's not Indiegogo, it's not GoFundMe or some other platforms that you might have heard of. These are securities regulated by the SEC with the same concept as what Amazon or IBM or any major company can do. The rules are obviously different, but companies can now sell shares or bonds to anyone, well, depending on the title, to anyone in the country and capitalize through that way, no matter how big they are, no matter what is the numbers on their balance sheet or how long their operating history is. So this is really exciting, and we'll go through the different titles and learn about each one, because at each stage of the company's growth cycle, up until the point where you're ready to go public, the Jobs Act has a title that can help you. Next. So this was passed by overwhelming support. One of the ways that Washington has worked in the past half decade. The Jobs Act was passed in 2012. The various titles that I'm going to talk about today, Reg CF, Reg D, Reg A+, and Emerging Growth Company Status, were all phased in through different phases over the last 5 years. The last one in May of 2016 with Reg CF, which will be the last one I talked about. as I said, this can help a company at any stage of the life cycle, but one of the main things that it does is companies that are smaller but they have the capacity and are thinking about going public, this allows them to skip a lot of the regulatory burdens that are normally associated with going public and be able to be listed on a regulatory exchange for about a third of the cost, the legal and accounting costs and the compliance costs that normally go into a company being listed on a public exchange. Next. And so you'll see why in this next slide, why this was so important. The economists and other people who study the U.S. economy have concluded that capital markets, emerging and dynamic capital markets are very important, and you can see sort of the trends here and what IPOs are doing. You see the peak in the 90s, and there's been that steady decline since then. And so Reg A Plus, which I'm about to talk about, and emerging growth status are two ways that help companies go into and enter the capital public markets. Next. So Reg A Plus is the first one. This one went live in 2015. There are two tiers here. Tier 1, you can raise up to $20 million through selling securities and selling equity or debt throughout the United States and throughout the world. Tier 2 allows you to raise up to $50 million. And the good part about this is you get to skip any state regulatory compliance matters. It's all federal, so there's about a 2 or 3 month qualification process with the SEC, but after that you're done. And this is also interesting for companies that may be wanting to sell digital tokens or coins, because this process can be used for that, and there's no question on the back end if they're securities or if they're not, or if the SEC is going to come knocking down on your door because they pre-qualified it. Once again, you get to raise up to $50 million. I think that number is probably going to go up. In fact, the House Financial Services Committee has already passed a bill raising that to $75 million. We'll talk about some future fixes here in a minute. But that's the basics of Reg A Plus. Go to the next one. One of the interesting things about it is the company can test the waters before spending all the money on compliance professionals and the lawyers and the accountants and all the people that you need to have to go public. You can test the waters, get your message out there, gauge the interest of, is this something that the investor pool is going to be interested in? And if it's not, you can shut it down without a lot of costs. As I said, you can simultaneously list these securities on the NASDAQ or on the NYSE. So if this is a new company but it's primed to go public, this is much easier way to get your issues listed and get your company listed on a major public exchange. Go next. So far in the first year, you see the numbers there. Last year there was 122 successful companies, raised about 236 million. The average raise was about 18 million. As this becomes more prevalent throughout the country, those numbers are going to go up. This is the one where everyone in the finance industry really likes this one. Because of some of the unique features that I just mentioned, and those numbers are going to go up. The trend is curving upward very quickly. Go next. Okay, so here are some of the businesses. This slide isn't really all that great with the colors and everything, but here are some of the industries that have taken advantage so far of Reg A Plus. Mainly being finance, industry, real estate, manufacturing, retail, and construction. But this is available to any company that's for profit and has not gone public yet. Next, you can see some of the geography here. Some of the parts of the United States where you would expect this to be really prevalent. On the West Coast, California sort of culturally, socially gets this kind of thing that I'm talking about, maybe more so than the rest of the country. But that's one of the things that I try to do, is sort of bring this mindset of decentralized capital funding to the rest of the country. Texas has also done well. The I-95 corridor in the Northeast has also done well. Go next. So after the IPO, this is another aspect of the Jobs Act that is really exciting. The company can apply for emerging growth company status. And what this does, for up to 5 years, it allows the company to not have to deal with as much of the regulatory burdens that a public company normally has to do. It's called the public company on-ramp. And so it eases you into these burdens for up to 5 years if you meet the qualifications, among them being less than $1 billion in revenue and less than 700 million in outstanding shares. We'll go next. So that's Reg D. And so now we're going to talk about that was a Reg A plus. Now we're going to talk about Reg D 506C, and then after that we'll talk about Reg CF and some of the changes that are going to make these titles even more dynamic. Reg D is really the big one that's been around since since the 1980s. It's about $1 trillion a year goes into Reg D, but the Jobs Act tweaked it a little bit, allowing it. Before, it was very much you had to be within an existing network of investors or broker dealers to be able to take advantage of Reg D. Now it's still only. By the way, I should have mentioned that Reg A Plus is open to everyone. It's open to all available. It's open to all Americans, all 320 million Americans, and people throughout the globe. Reg D is only open to accredited investors only. It's about 8 million Americans, and then the rest, people in the rest of the world, follow their own rules. But what Reg D 506C allows is general solicitation. So you don't have to be in one of those existing networks to take advantage of investing in one of these companies. And for the companies, they can broadcast and advertise their issues throughout through whatever medium they deem most effective, over the internet or whatever, to be able to reach new investors and new people to potentially become part of their company. We'll go next. So far, it's had a small effect on what the overall Reg D marketplace is right now, which is, I mentioned, about $1 trillion a year. This has added about 1.5 billion a year. It's also allowed some marketplaces, some online marketplaces to emerge, which has also increased the value of this and allowed about 6,000 more private offerings and about another 1.5 billion to be part of that Reg D. Go next. So Reg CF, this is really the most. This is really the lowest level, the retail level, the entrepreneur, the small business, the group of people working out of a basement who need capital, but they don't normally have. They're not going to go get it from a bank, or they don't want a venture capitalist to sort of take their money, take all their company. This allows the company to keep their company while also building out a network of potential investors and even a network of potential customers or clients, depending on what kind of business you have. This is available to all Americans within limits, accredited and non-accredited investors. Throughout the past, it's only been around for less than 2 years, May of 2016. It just recently hit the 100 million mark in aggregate. So there's been 100 million in issues. Again, these can be shares, these can be debt, They can be warrants, which are very popular in this space, so a promise for future equity once the company hits a certain benchmark. And it's really small now, but it's really going to grow as more people learn about it. Most small companies don't realize that this is an available option to them. So as this grows, this 100 million, and as hopefully some Congress gets some fixes here, this 100 million is going to turn into 500 billion or 5 billion, hopefully very soon. We'll go next. So Reg A Plus so far, I mentioned some of this, about 100 million. You can see in that last bullet point, it's really started to pick up steam here in the last year. 33 million last year, 25 million of that was in the last 6 months. So it's starting to gain momentum. It's starting to get more awareness in the larger business capitalization community. By the way, I should mention, you can stack these on top of one another and get sort of the benefits of both. You can run a simultaneous Reg D and Reg CF if you have a network of accredited investors, but you want some of the ancillary benefits of a Reg CF, which would be the free marketing operation that it generates from having just a wide range of investors geographically spread out. We'll go next. Here you can see some of the industries that have taken advantage of Reg CF so far. Again, this is going to keep growing, but some of the ones that have jumped on the bandwagon early are food and beverage, entertainment, technology, healthcare, and transportation. We'll go next. Reg CFs have to go through an accredited portal. Most of these portals are in the there's about 38 of them now. This is a little bit older. Most of them are are concentrated in the West Coast. As I said, California kind of culturally gets this. Los Angeles is a big hub for this stuff. But it doesn't matter where your company is. You can sell through one of these portals, and they're really sprinkled throughout the United States. But most of the big ones are on the West Coast. You may have heard of some of these: WeFunder, Start Engine. Go next. Okay, so future fixes. These are some of the things that are in the pipeline right now. As Ahmad said, I'm in Washington, D.C. I go to these hearings where Congress discusses the things that will make this even more dynamic and grow it even more. So I'm going to run through some of the fixes that are in the pipeline for each of these. The raising the tier limit, I already mentioned that's already been done, at least in the House. It's not law yet, but Reg A Plus is going to go up, I would imagine, very soon to 75 or 100 million, and still get all the benefits that I mentioned with Tier 2, with not having to deal with any kind of state regulators. We'll go next. Okay, so 506B. One of the things is who is an accredited investor? Who gets to get in on that $1 trillion a year of capitalization that capitalizes the private markets in the United States? That definition really needs to expand from that 8 million. It doesn't matter. There's a very static formula that the SEC uses to decide who is sophisticated enough to invest in these Reg Ds. That really is probably going to expand because, as it is right now, you either have to have $1 million in capital or in net worth, not counting your house, or some other things, and then it's just really too rigid, and that's one of the things that's going to get expanded. We'll go next. Reg CF, again, raise the limits. It's only $1 million right now you can raise for Reg CF. That is in the pipeline to get that up to 5 or 10 million. Some of the other things, it's ridiculous that an accredited investor can't invest in or has limits within a Reg CF that they don't have in a Reg D, but compliance professionals just get around that by stacking the Reg D on top of the Reg CF. We'll go next. Let's talk about initial coin offerings, ICOs, a little bit as we conclude. Everybody, this is a big topic with everyone around the world. Everybody's heard of Bitcoin. Everybody's heard probably of ICOs and how dynamic they are and how quickly they have entered the capitalization conversation, if you will. So in the United States, at least, the SEC has basically declared that there are no pure utility coins, or essentially no pure utility coins. So any ICO based in the United States, or even not based in the United States, but that sells to accredited investor or any investors in the United States, will have to go through the Jobs Act. It's basically the only option to do an ICO now that the regulatory environment has changed so much, even this year. So we'll go next. So here's a little graph just talking about, or a couple of them just talking about the surge in ICOs. The first one was done in 2013. You see the massive surge in the past 2 years. It's interesting here on the one on the right. You see the little, the dip after July 2017, right there in the middle, from 560 it dropped to 329. That was really when the SEC did their first initial warning that you have to follow the rules here, and you can't just sell to anybody and market to anybody and get all the benefits of the titles without following the rules. But then it shot back right back up. It may dip a little bit more here, but it's going to shoot back up as the compliance professionals and blockchain companies adapt to the regulatory environment. And it's not going to be that different from the Wild West that was essentially the first half of 2017. It'll still be initial point offerings will still be available. They'll be available, and you can do them. Just do them within the parameters of the Jobs Act, Reg A Plus, and Reg D. Next, so that's really it. I hope this has been informative for you. Ahmad mentioned that we may do a question and answer. I'm happy to answer any questions about that. You can see my contact information in there. This is really what I do full time. I talk about the Jobs Act, and I hopefully inform people about the new ways that businesses are going to get capitalized from idea all the way through going public. There's something here for a company and something here for investors to allow them to take advantage of this and to really bring down the traditional barriers and the traditional gatekeepers that have existed with investment banks or whatever, just regular banks who whatever way that companies were stopped from getting capital before. Those barriers are coming down, and the Jobs Act is what's helping them do that. So that's it. I will turn it. I appreciate
your input. Again, we have posted online Paul's email address, his website, and so forth. Paul, I also like to later on set up another session and just talk about ICO itself, because it's a very vast topic. And along with that, I will be bringing and inviting some of the other law offices around the globe where we can have a panelist and discuss about some of this, where we can educate the market. So with that in mind, again, I want to thank Paul. Just as a sideline, I want you to know we are using Pixel by NETSTAIRS. Our panelists are not physically available. They're virtual from different parts of the world. For instance, as you can see, Mr. Josie is coming through his mobile phone, connecting to all of our guests and audience, and Maddie being broadcasting from Europe to the rest of the world, while Ricardo is doing YouTube live right now. So with that in mind, I would like to move to Mr. Jose Carreon and talk about real-time securities and some of the topics that we have dealt with. So let me give you a little background about Jose. Jose is based on Silicon Valley. He's a chief technology evangelist at the Secure Care International, and he's based also as a chief technology officer in Peru Connect. Carol has about more than 30 years of experience in information technology based in San Jose, California. So he brings a lot of Silicon Valley flavor and mindset and so forth. He held products marketing, international market development, and management of strategic alliances, positions, and he's been really involved and devoted 21 years of his life into information security. He was one of the chairman and team members of First Products to Market, recognized with industry awards in IT security. And with that in mind, I will turn over the podium to Jose to talk about the real-time security and its impact in our daily lives. Back to you, Jose.
Thank you, Ahmed. Thank you very much for that introduction. Good morning, everybody. Once again, I'm Jose Carrion. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for SecureCare International. It's a consulting firm, it's an information security consultant firm based here in the Silicon Valley. We do provide a lot of security services, mainly in the area of GRC, governance, risk, and compliance. And I also drive a startup in Latin America called Peru Connect, where I'm the Chief Technology Officer. A company, a small emerging company that focuses on digital transformation, where we bring solutions to promote the development of smart cities, specifically solutions in the area of teleeducation, telemedicine, and telesecurity. But the question that we're posing ourselves this morning is how these new technologies, what I like to call them Web 4.0 technologies, are bringing all of these functionality. The question is, how secure are they? And every time that you ask those questions, we got to look at things from different angles. In security, as you probably know, the infrastructure is as secure as your weakest link. And also another thing that we say in security is that the security experts, we have to be correct all the time. The hackers, they have to be correct only one time. So it's always a challenge that we have to work on as the technology in the industry is evolving. So what I like to do this morning is in looking at the new technologies of real-time communications that are typically coupled with artificial intelligence, virtual reality, the whole explosion of the Internet of Things. These technologies inherently are already secure because they run over secure links, because they also use different security mechanisms. But the interesting thing about it is the ability to further fortify these infrastructures. And that's what I'm going to try to explain briefly this morning, that when you look at security, there's four different angles or four different lenses really that you look at security. One is data security, the data itself. Second is network security, where you protect the data while it's in transit, data in flight. Then you have web services security, where typically all the applications house the data, process the data, and provide the web services. And fourth is mobile security or endpoint security. So when we look at security through those four different lenses, each lens has a different angle. It has a different objective, and it also uses different technologies. For example, when we talk about data security in the context of real-time communications or in the context of interactive communications where we share files, where we share sensitive information. In data security, basically the principal idea is to protect the data itself. That typically gets coupled with privacy, gets coupled with confidentiality. So there's technologies that allow you to do that. In my personal opinion, and I'm a very, very strong proponent of encryption. Encryption is probably, in the area of expertise that I have, is probably one of my fortes, something that I've dedicated many, many years. So when we talk about data security, encryption is the cornerstone of what we do. We use symmetric algorithms, we use asymmetric algorithms, but the interesting thing about data security is not only fortifying the environment, it's understanding where is the sensitive data that you need to protect. So there's methods like data classification in many of these things. So I guess the point that I'm trying to make here, as these technologies already are secure, we have the ability to fortify those environments depending of the requirements of the clients, the requirements of the environments themselves. Number two is a network security. Network security is an interesting space in that what we get from our carriers, say the AT&Ts, the Sprints, the Verizons of the world, what they provide us is really connectivity. And that connectivity in today's world comes coupled with several elements of security. One of them called HTTPS, which is basically a transmission protocol, a network protocol that has a security mechanism based on the use of SSL certificates. But a good example of that is that the SSL protocol that typically runs at the transport level, what it does, it provides tunneling encryption. It protects all the information that goes from point A to point B. The question is that once it arrives to its destination, is again in the clear. So there is a challenge that we always face when we talk about network security, but the good news is that we have the ability to fortify those transmissions by encapsulating what we denominate the sensitive data into digital envelopes. Those digital envelopes can be further protected with the use of PINs, with the use of public and private keys. So as you can see, the technologies as secure as they already come out of the development process, we have the ability to further fortify that. Because we're living in a world where information is freely, involuntarily put out there through social media. And that's what takes me to the next step, which is web services security. A comment that I think interesting to make is if we look at the four quadrants, data, network, web services, and endpoint, data and network is typically where people invest most money in hardware. That's where a lot of technologies already exist. Technologies that actually been around for decades. Like Ahmed mentioned, I've been doing this for over 21 years. I work with the guys that actually have the patents, they created the algorithms that run the financial networks. However, those things over the years have to evolve. And that evolution basically needs to protect not only the environment, but the applications themselves. So data and network is typically the areas where you have more security, more products. When you move into web services, here's when you start talking about the Facebooks, here's where we start talking about the Twitters, the Instagrams, the WhatsApps, all these applications that roam around the network and provide web services. So what do we do, for example, in the context of Facebook and in the context of the social media explosion that we are living through? From a security perspective, I have very strong opinions about social media, where people voluntarily provide information that may be very sensitive. However, many people do not realize the risks that those things are creating. So when we talk about web services is an environment that lives with one foot in private networks and one in public networks. They do live in what we call the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, which you have certain security mechanisms for the outside and another elements for the outside in order for applications like email to work. So here's where we many times do a lot of work in fortifying the applications, either to hardware encryption, to the use of key management, to the use of different security methods to basically surround the applications that have not been developed from the beginning with security in mind, with different elements of security that enables us to protect the confidentiality, the privacy, the integrity of the data, yet at the same time create what's called the non-repudiation aspect of any transaction that is done electronically. In the fourth window or the fourth lens that we see security through is endpoint security or mobile security. Possibly the most vulnerable of the four of them, in that the whole concept of endpoint security, it starts by providing technology to people that use endpoints and connecting to infrastructures. But at the end of the day, the responsibility and the onus of security at the endpoint, it's on the user themselves. So you probably heard this before. In any infrastructure where humans are involved in security, the humans are always the weakest link. We can program technology, we can surround ourselves with encryption, key management, different levels of identity and biometrics, everything that exists. But if we, as people, we do not protect the information, that information easily ends up in the hands of people that have different ideas, different objectives with the use of these data. In fact, 75% of security events, either DDoS, distributed denials of service, hackings that we read just about every day on the news, are done because there's someone on the inside or people that virtually find open doors. We do not have this habit of protecting the information to the degree that we need in the world that we live in today. So what I like to end this brief talk with is that security is the responsibility of everybody. If the network doesn't work or if someone hacks your phone, who do you call? Many times when I ask my students, because I teach information security at the University of California, I also teach information security throughout different universities in the Americas, and I ask my young students, typically millennials, where is your data? And the answer is, it's in the cloud. All right, good answer, but where is the cloud? And who do you call when you have someone hacking your phone, right? So it is very important that we all understand that in the world of social media, in the world of interactive communication, the real-time communication, that we do everything live. Security has to become a part of what we do in our daily management of our information. And also, if we look in the macro sense, the governance in the management of the risk. At the end of the day, there's no single bullet that takes care of all the security problems. Security, it is not 100% science. It always on the move. As you can see, before we used to talk about denials of services. Today we're talking about ransomware using Bitcoins, right? So everything is evolving in a way that we have to become more conscious about how we manage the information. Now, in terms of the technologies, for example, provided by NETSTAIRS, the Pixel technology, it is a technology framework that is being built on new standards. That's the good news. We're using strong encryption algorithms, we're using different methods of authenticating, and even further, this technology enables us to extend the scheme of security depending on the requirements of the client. For example, before someone signs on into a session like this, you can identify them, you can ask them to authenticate themselves with 1, 2, or 3-factor authentication. While they're in session, you can monitor everything that they do. Basically, you have a log, because in closing, in security, the ideal world in security can be really summarized in a few words. One is prevention, visibility, and having the ability to predictability. If we get to those 3 points, which we eventually will, we're not there yet, considering all the technologies that we do. However, technologies by the ones provided by NETSTAIRS, Pixel, for example, has the ability to protect the information while we're talking. At the same time, it enables us to further fortify the environment depending on the requirements of the clients. So what I want to close this with, exhorting you to be very, very conscious about your information. The information you have on your phone, information that you upload into social media, because there are people out there on a daily basis looking for open doors to do some damage. So what we need to do is all be responsible for the security of the environments, and in that way we will be able to at least mitigate or neutralize the different risks that we run every day. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope in the next session we can have a little more time to have questions and answers, or even to talk about different case studies that I'll be very happy to share with you. I could virtually entertain you for hours, telling you the different cases where security using artificial intelligence is really managing the environment that we live in today. Thank you very much for the invitation, and I'd love to be back.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Jose.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Definitely value the input, because even if you are raising money or you are running a business, or like us, all we do is video. So with this kind of process, you can appreciate and understand that security is paramount to everything we do. So we don't sell data, we sell software, we sell SaaS and business models, because we always believe in clients' data integrated, protected, secure, and just like Jose mentioned, we all come from a line of security background in our careers, and we value that. With that in mind, we will end this session again. Thank you for everybody's attendance, and look forward to our next session. Talk to you soon. Ciao
Thank you,
for now.
Tom. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Jose.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Okay. Are we done, Nadi?